Our vision is to inspire the world and remove limiting beliefs in your mind. At Sprinkle with Hope, our mission is to inspire you to live your best life by sharing stories of hope, resilience, courage, and overcoming adversity.
We believe that everyone has the potential to lead a joyful, fulfilling life, and we hope to encourage and motivate you to pursue your dreams.
Welcome to the Sprinkled with Hope podcast.
Welcome to your Sprinkle with Hope podcast, and your host Shane. And today I'm super excited to have Lauren Sisler with us. Lauren, thank you so much for joining us.
Hello. It's great to be with you guys. I know we've been trying to get this on the schedule for several months now. Finally, football season wind down. Life is slowing down a little bit, maybe. But I so appreciate the opportunity to join you guys.
Yeah, so Lauren mentioned I've actually seen her on the sidelines of college football for years. That is a passion of mine, college football. I think that's such a great thing to do. I mean, can you get us on the sideline?
Oh, that's like the $1 million question. If I had $1 for everybody that asked me that question, I would be a rich woman, and then I could probably just pay for like everybody to be on the field at all times, right?
Yeah.
So what a great opportunity you have to sit there watching college football, talking about it, talking to the players and coaches. I admire you for that. But I didn't know, really quickly, let me just give you a little bit of backstory for Lauren. So she does that, but I think it's been 20 years. She tragically lost both of her parents very quickly, suddenly. And my first question for you, Lauren, is why are you opening up to be, you talk about embracing yourself and really being your story. So what made you choose to do that for you?
Well, I really appreciate that opportunity. I know going into this, we're supposed to, spread hope, right? And happiness. And really, I have to say, despite the tragic circumstances of what happened almost 20 years ago, as you mentioned, March 20th of 2003, March 24th of 2003, when both of my parents passed away tragically. My parents were unfortunately dealing with, chronic pain, and we're going to a pain management doctor. And so over the course of about 3 or 4 years, sort of their chronic pain escalated, and they were taking a lot of prescription drugs as prescribed to them by their pain management doctor. And unfortunately, they became addicted to it and were misusing the prescription drugs. But it was something that was so hidden. And I think that's really what has called me to come out and be so outspoken about it, because I think that a lot of times throughout life, and whether it's addiction, everyone deals with shame. Everyone deals with shame. There is shame that is rooted inside of us as humans, and whatever it is you're going through, whatever life circumstances have created that shame inside of you. And it sometimes can be so suffocating. And I felt like my parents really were, became a product of that, of that shame, and they didn't want to speak out. And really then I inherited that shame, and then I didn't want to speak out on their behalf because I felt like their legacy was bound in my hands. And so then I realized over the course of time, and thankfully, just with family and support and friends, and realizing, okay, wait a sec, like, my parents aren't defined by how they died, but by how they lived their lives. And now I can use that same messaging and help people to get out of that trap that they feel, bound to that shame that they might feel, and say, hey, it's okay. We're all going through this. And I think that power of connection, right? Realizing, okay, she knows someone that's dealing with this. He knows someone. Everyone's going through something, and it's on varying levels, but it's all equally as painful and can be all equally as shameful. And so really, guys, that's my goal, is to use my voice to help people to realize, like, we're in this together, and we can all stand up against some of the stigmas that we feel society places on us, and say, hey, it's okay. It's okay. Let's get help. Let's find hope in recovery and use the resources that are out there for us.
Love it. Really, as you were talking, I was thinking about shame, and there's a lot of things we could be shameful about, right? I mean, none of our past, is like rainbows and sunshine all the time, right?
Nope,
And
definitely
so
not.
what have you kind of seen that's helped you kind of overcome some of that shame? Is it the mindset? Is it, being around positive people? What are some of the tips or tricks that you've used to kind of overcome some of that shame that was in your past?
Yeah, that's such a great question, Jason. I think it's obviously a combination of a lot of things. I think first and foremost, it's that healing process, right? You have to go through a level of grief and then healing. But I mean, for many years it was denial, right? And so it
Yeah.
almost took me to getting to the acceptance part to say, okay, wait, this is really what happened, and that's okay. And so really, I think it was that support system, having my mom's sister really kind of support me and just say, look, Lauren, like, you can't influence the opinions of others, you necessarily, in most cases, and you can't change how your parents died. But again, they're not defined by how they died, but by how they lived. And I would say just over the course of time, it was a process, because I think,
Sure.
a lot of times as I'm telling the story, I'm speeding it up, right? Like in a minute, I'm telling the story in like a minute, and people are like, well, wait a sec, like that sounded easy. No, it's not always easy. But I do think it's really just focusing in on and saying, you know what, I'm feeling this inside of me because of whatever it is you're going through. And number one, I'm a very big advocate of going out and seeking help, professional help with a counselor, a therapist, someone that you can talk to that has that unbiased opinion. And what's funny about that is I think a lot of times people say, well, I don't feel like I'm really dealing with anything, or, they've maybe bottled it up. And, I'll wake up and sometimes have my appointment and be like, I've got nothing to talk about today. And then I literally get in there and I have a million things to talk about. Right.
Yeah.
And you find that it just sometimes takes like having conversations, right? So conversations to me are so important. And I will say for me, it started out in smaller groups, to where I was just speaking to, maybe a friend, someone that I trusted. Because for 7 years, really, even my best friend didn't know how my parents had passed away, because I was so ashamed of it. And I
Yeah.
mean, it's my best friend, right? Somebody I trust with all my being. And for some reason, I just could not have that full conversation and that full acceptance, but also because I hadn't accepted it myself. And so when I found that acceptance and said, this is what it is, and then had those conversations, and what's amazing about it is I truly believe, y'all, that the truth will set you free. And when
Yes.
I started sharing the truth, people around me, instead of me, my fear was they were going to judge and they were going to think, oh, wow, I can't believe, your parents went through that. I can't believe, maybe you'll fall into those same addictive behaviors. Maybe you're not qualified, because we manifest these things in our mind of what people are going to think. Right. And in many ways, we're fearful of judgment, and yet we're judging them before they've judged us. Right. And so
true.
it kind of comes full circle, and it's like, hold on a sec, like back up. And so when I actually started sharing my parents' story more openly, people were so loving and supportive. And in many ways, some of the people that knew my parents very well, had always wondered, like, what happened, right? Because it's not something that gets announced. Like people don't, there was a couple of articles here and there, and we lived in a small town. So of course rumors swirl, but I don't think people really had that closure. They didn't really know what had happened. And I think even 10 years later, when I actually started becoming very vocal about it, and it started kind of catching on social media and obviously through news networks and whatnot, the response was resounding in many ways of like, we loved your parents and we still love them the same. And I have peace now because I know what happened. And ultimately it's tragic, because I wish we would have known in that time. Maybe we could have done something to help them. But now I have peace, and I'm going through this thing. And now it gives me encouragement to say, I'm going to go help other people and maybe what they're going through. And so really it's support, the support system, the acceptance, obviously seeking professional help, but ultimately just having those small conversations, because you just feel this level of freedom that is truly special.
I love what you just said, that, yeah, it was a tragic thing and you wish you could help them then. But I honestly believe you're helping spread their legacy by what you're doing right now to honor them and share your message with everybody else. And I just love how you said that. I think it was about a month ago, I saw something that you posted on social media that basically said something like, what you go through doesn't define you. It's who you are and who you serve and who you reach out. I absolutely love that message. But Lauren, let's say one of the listeners or somebody who's hearing this has gone through something and they feel like, well, I can't find help, or what would you say to them? What would be maybe one small step that they could do to sort of get out of their rut?
Well, and I think that's probably the biggest thing is, first of all, acknowledgement, recognizing there's a problem, right? Because a lot of times, I mean, we all have some sort of ego, and I kind of hate that word because ego can be kind of harsh, but in many ways, we try to project who we are, and we try to project this persona and this presence because, again, we want to be accepted. And I feel like we all strive for acceptance, and for so many years I strive for that. I still strive for acceptance, right? We all strive for acceptance, but I think the first step is recognizing, ooh, I've got a problem with this. And again, it may not be addiction with substances. I mean, their addiction comes in so many different shapes and sizes, whether it's a reliance on food, whether it's gambling, whether it's pornography. There are so many different things, but maybe, you've been in a unhealthy marriage or an unhealthy relationship and allowed that to really tear you down. Maybe you've experienced an infidelity. Maybe you've experienced divorce. Maybe, there's a gazillion different things, gotten fired from a job. Maybe you weren't cut out for that job, or you weren't, necessarily, putting forth your best effort because it wasn't a good fit for you. Right. And then you look back and you're like, wow, and then you sometimes allow that to manifest and you let that be a reflection of who you are. No, that's just a season of life. That's just an area where maybe you fell short on a couple things, or you made a decision that took you in a different direction than you expected. But we don't have that crystal ball that allows us to see that future. And so you can get really grounded, just ground up by that shame of whatever circumstances you're going through. And I think, people can just, first of all, recognize it and say, okay, there's an issue here, and this is really getting me down. It's making it hard for me to get out of bed in the morning. And then it's taking that next step and saying, okay, you know what? I'm going to have that one conversation with my friend Shane. I'm going to share with him, I've kind of been dealing with this thing. I'd love maybe some advice, or, what your thoughts are. And then it's just having that one conversation then turns into 2, can turn into 10, or maybe it does just remain a small conversation, but it allows you to really take that internal stuff and get it out of you externally and say, okay. And then, ultimately, like I said, if you have resources, whether it's, someone, a professional to talk to, and especially if it does pertain to, substances, wherever you live and wherever you are, there's a lot of great resources out there. And I'll just say this, it's not one size fits all, because I think a lot of people have this mindset of like, okay, we'll just use, substance misuse as an example. Maybe you struggle with alcohol. Maybe you drink too much alcohol and it's become a part of your everyday life and it's a struggle. Well, the automatic thought for most people is like, well, I'm just going to have to go spend, $30,000 to go to rehab for 30 days. And that people just think there's only one resource, right? There's only one way to do it, but it looks different for everybody. And I will tell you, there are people that have found recovery, and just going to groups, going to help groups, going to AA meetings, going to, small groups in their church, whatever it is, that works for you. And I think that's where you can actually find resources, counselors, or, people that can actually sort of guide you and say, you know what, you're dealing with this. I think this might be a good fit for you where you're at right now in your life. And so I just want to encourage people, because I think there's a fear in even just being told what the next steps are. Because then it's like, oh, well, then I have to commit to that. Right.
Right.
And really, again, it's not one size fits all. And I think sometimes it's baby steps, right? It's baby steps getting there. And so just taking that first step, acknowledging it, and then finding that resource that can, start to help you put pieces in place. And again, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. And that's how life is, right? It's a marathon. And I think we all know that nothing happens overnight. And so it takes work and it takes dedication, but also you can find so much happiness and joy on the other side if you can really work through some of those issues.
So great. So you're speaking my language, and I really like what you're talking about. And one of the things that you've mentioned a couple times is this idea of manifesting things in our mind. And Shane and I have talked about just the power that we have in just the thoughts that we create, and what we think can manifest whatever it is that we are trying to do. If we're trying to be positive, and I'm thinking about that, that's the what I'm going to project on everybody, right? Is this positive, happy attitude. How have you kind of seen that manifest in your life, that positive, happy energy, that kind of thing, as opposed to the opposite, and the power of the mind and being able to do that?
Yeah, man, I'll tell you that the mind can be a tricky thing, can it?
Yes.
It can be a tricky thing. And I think it's amazing because, I think that what's amazing about it is you can speak things into existence. So for instance, when my parents passed away, I was telling the sugar-coated story for so many years. Mom died of respiratory failure. Dad died of a heart attack, because that sounded so much better than addiction or overdose, right?
Right.
And so I would tell this story, and it was to the point I was not there that day. I got the call from my father, and then later got home and found out he had passed away too. I was not in the house. I was not there when everything transpired. So there's this big, dark, black hole that I had in my mind of like from point A to point B. And so there was all this opportunity for me to manifest and create these things and these visions of what I thought happened and how things were pieced together. And look, at the end of the day, we'll never truly know everything that transpired. You can never insert yourself into someone else's mind. I don't know what was going through my mom's mind. I don't know what was going through my dad's mind, but in my heart and knowing them as people, I truly believe that they had just fell victim to this addiction and were just being sucked into it and ravaged by it and doing everything they could to just get to the surface. And it was so hard for them. But all that to say is that it's amazing how my mind manifested these thoughts. And even, when I went back to Rutgers, my gymnastics coach actually knew that my parents had died of overdoses. And she would hear me telling other people in the gym, I would just tap dance around it. And I would tell this story. And many years later, I asked her, because I'm actually working on a book right now, uncovering a lot of things, which by the way, is very healing. So even if you're not going to publish a book, journaling, learning, getting stuff on paper is super helpful. So another tip there that can help. But I'd asked her, I said, why did you never say anything? And she said, because it wasn't my place to correct you, for me to come and overhear you telling someone this and be like, well, no, that's not what happened to your parents. She didn't feel it was her place to tell me. And really my Auntie Linda, my Uncle Mike, like I said, really tried to tell me. But the problem is I kind of had deaf ears, and I would be so resistant. I would just fight, shut the conversation down. And it got to the point where my aunt felt like, well, I've got to love her and support her. I can't just keep shoving this truth in her face. She's going to have to be ready for it. And I think that's where the journey comes in, that we all have to have like that opportunity. So with that being said, our mind can play many, many games on us, and it's easy to manifest these things. And I think that's where, again, finding the truth, seeking out the truth. And again, it might not happen overnight, but finding out the truth and saying, okay, this is what I'm dealing with. Maybe this is why I'm dealing with some of these issues. Maybe my relationship with food or my relationship with money is a product of something I experienced as a child or when I was younger. Okay, how do I pull myself out of this? And I think there's a lot of great resources out there, podcasts. Obviously, we're doing one right now. Just people that you can listen to and get that sort of, okay, I've got a bad relationship with this thing. How do I maybe change that mindset around that particular item, or that particular substance or that particular thing that I've got a relationship with. And then it's just sort of pulling layers back. And again, it's a process, and it's being okay with that process, not pushing yourself to say, well, this is my timeline, and by this point in time on, this date on this year, I've got to be at this point, and I think that's where people get really discouraged, because they feel like, well, I should be healed by now. I should be further along than this. And then they get back into that rabbit hole of just manifesting thoughts that, shouldn't be there.
Yeah, that's what a great thought. I've really, really enjoyed this discussion. So near the end of the podcast, Lauren, we have what we call the double down dose. So I have a question, and then Jason will finish.
Double down dose. Oh, fancy. Okay.
Really, really simple questions on the surface, but they are deep.
Okay.
So,
and
Lauren,
so is this supposed to be like rapid fire? Like, am I supposed to answer them quickly?
Nope.
Okay.
We'll see how this plays out generally.
As you can see, I'm very thorough sometimes in like my responses. I talk.
Love it. Lauren, the first question is, how would you define hope?
Oh, that's good. Defining hope. Hope is something to me that gives people reassurance that there is good on the other side. When I
Mm.
think about hope, it is knowing and trusting and having faith that there is light at the end of the darkness. That to me is hope.
So
Mm.
good.
Love it. So
I don't think I've ever answered that question before. That's so good.
so the
I
second
mean, I could have
one.
just done a Google search and been like, okay, definition of hope.
Exactly.
But,
So the second one's usually a little bit tougher. And that is, what is your definition of love?
ooh, my definition of love is, my definitions are hard. I'm not like, I do obviously write some with my job, but not an English major here. Definition of love is, to me, when you feel absolutely just, what's the word? When you feel fully supported, when you feel whole. And I think that a lot of times there's an emptiness that we can feel, and an isolation and a separation. I think love to me is when those walls come in and you just feel that you've got this blanket that is just giving you sort of peace and hope and love, and really just brings you into this place where you feel this warmth, this ongoing warmth of whatever it is. And whatever it is you're looking for love, and it can be from people, it can be from places, it can be from different things in your life. But to me, love is something that provides this warmth and really this feeling of taken care of, being taken care of. And I think that's something that we probably feel a lot when we're younger, and as children, as we grow up, and kind of reflecting on that and knowing, okay, this is something that really gave me that love. And of course, that's something I always felt for my parents. So I just think about like that, just how my parents were so loved, but also loved me so greatly, and that unconditional love. And I think that's a key piece to it too. Unconditional love, where no matter how bad you mess up, you're always going to know you're loved and supported, regardless of how many turns your life takes.
What a great
So
thought.
good.
Seriously, we love asking those questions. So
That's deep. You were kidding. You weren't kidding.
So appreciate your time today. Best wishes to you, your family, your baby that's coming very soon. We'll watch for your book when that releases. We'll make
Yes.
sure, and hopefully that's sooner than later, but we'll watch for that. And again, thank you so much for your time, Lauren.
Thank you guys both, Shane and Jason. You guys were awesome. And I just wish everybody out there all the best. Stay happy, stay healthy, and sprinkle yourself with hope and love, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes I like to ask just one last question, which is usually, is there any parting words that you'd like to leave with the audience, something you feel inspired to share with them as they're listening to this episode that we haven't either talked about yet, or just any thoughts that you might have in closing here?
Well, I would say that my mantra and tagline is fall in love with your story. And that is one thing I encourage people to do all the time, is no matter how many chapters, there is a book of life, right? And you're filling that book. You're continuing to write your story. And there are going to be beautiful chapters that make you laugh, that make you smile, that make you reflect. And then there's going to be those chapters you're like, I want to rip this on out and throw it in the trash. But you know what? That chapter is there, and that is part of your story. And I encourage you to fall in love with every chapter of your story, because it is beautiful, and it truly is what shapes and molds us into who we are. And as a sports reporter, I have that opportunity to tell those stories of the athletes, the coaches, the fans, the community, and everybody around them. Those stories that I truly believe can have a positive impact on everybody else's life. And without going through something, without perseverance, I think sometimes it's hard to find that success. And I do truly believe that it takes us really going through things, going through challenges, going through failures, to truly come back up and climb that ladder of success and find joy and gratitude. And so fall in love with your story and find joy and gratitude in every single chapter.
Love it. What a way to end. Thanks, Lauren.